How I Survived the First Week of WW3. I used to think I'd seen the worst the world had to offer. After 10 years in the military, 2 tours in the Middle East, and a brief stint doing private security work, I thought I knew what collapse looked like. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened that week. My name's Adam Rains, 37. I've been living in Kaunas, Lithuania, for the past year, working as a freelance security consultant and occasionally training local private contractors. When I left the service, I wanted a fresh start, somewhere less familiar, somewhere far from home. Lithuania seemed quiet, peaceful, at least on the surface. For months, the news had been a slow boil of dread. Tensions mounting between NATO and Russia, border skirmishes, cyber attacks, disinformation campaigns flooding social media and official channels alike. Every few weeks, a new headline spiked the panic meter. Missiles moved, drills announced, diplomats recalled. But then things would settle again. People got used to the brink. It became background noise, like sirens in a city. You hear them, but after a while, you stop reacting. That Monday started like any other. Coffee, push-ups, a quiet jog through the park just after sunrise. The air was crisp, and the sun fought its way through a gray, overcast sky. My neighbor, Mantis, waved from his driveway while scraping frost off his car. I waved back. That was the last time I saw him. I got back inside and checked the news. The usual headlines. NATO condemns escalation in Baltics. Internet blackouts reported in parts of Poland and Romania. Russian submarine activity increases near Danish straits. Just the usual anxiety diet. I poured another coffee and told myself it was all posturing. That was before the alert popped up. Emergency bulletin. Multiple explosions reported in Vilnius. Unconfirmed reports of missile strikes. Shelter in place. My stomach dropped. Vilnius, a NATO capital. If true, this wasn't a skirmish. This was it. The red line crossed. No more brinksmanship. No more ambiguity. I called Eric, an old army buddy who worked in Berlin with military intelligence. No answer. I tried his wife. Straight to voicemail. The networks were already starting to jam. I knew what came next. The first strike wouldn't hit us all at once. But the ripple effects, those would arrive in hours. I went into prep mode. I kept a quiet go bag by the door. It wasn't full-on bug-out gear, but it had enough to last me 3 or 4 days on the move. Medical kit, sidearm, burner phone, solar charger, iodine tablets, food bars, cash, passport. I tossed in extra socks, a sweater, and a utility knife. Then I checked the power. Still up for now. I filled the bathtub and every container I had with water. Filled the sink, the kettle, the dog's bowl, even though I haven't had a dog in 5 years. Old habits. At noon, the power blinked once. Just a flicker. The internet stuttered. My phone buzzed. Alert! Lithuanian infrastructure under cyber attack. Limit digital communication. Conserve power. That's when I saw the smoke. From my apartment's balcony, I could see a thin black column rising in the distance. Toward the eastern edge of the city near the highway. It looked like a car fire, or a small explosion. Hard to tell. Then another, and another. The local news anchor looked pale, like he hadn't slept. His voice cracked while reading the bulletin. There were now confirmed reports of missile strikes on key NATO installations in Lithuania and Poland. Thousands dead. U.S. forces responding. NATO calling Article 5, collective defense. This was war. No room for denial. This was it. Around 2 p.m., panic hit the streets. People started running red lights. Parents yanked kids from school. Grocery store shelves emptied in minutes. Fights broke out in parking lots. I watched two grown men beat each other bloody over a tank of gas. By 4 p.m., the power went out for good. Cell service dropped. I had a crank radio, another habit from the sandbox. I tuned into Deutsche Welle and caught a shaky emergency broadcast. Evacuations ordered in sectors near potential military targets. Remain calm. Seek designated shelters. Government forces are mobilizing to maintain civil order. I knew what that meant. They expected strikes here too. I had a few hours, maybe less, before things got worse. I could leave. But where would I go? The highways were already gridlocked. Roads packed with thousands fleeing west, trying to outrun a war that had already crossed the border. I knew I'd never make it past the chaos in a car. On foot, maybe. But that meant traveling light and fast. I decided to wait until nightfall. Just before dusk, a sound rumbled across the sky. Low, like thunder, but not thunder. Jets, fast movers, headed east. Then came the sirens. My heart pounded. That old adrenaline rush I hadn't felt in years. The one that tightens your throat and tunnels your vision. I grabbed my bag, slung it over my shoulder, and locked my door behind me. Not that it mattered. No one would be coming back here. Outside, the street looked like something out of a nightmare. People dragging suitcases, some just running. A woman screamed into a dead phone. A man tried to coax his dog into a car already packed with people. Someone yelled that the border was closed. Someone else said tanks had been spotted near Kaunas. I didn't stick around. I cut through alleys and backyards, avoiding the main roads. I knew a path out through the old industrial train yard, abandoned for years, but it would take me west toward the rural outskirts. I figured I had a better chance surviving out there than in the middle of an urban powder keg. As I moved, the air grew thick with smoke. Fires had broken out, some from rioting, some from sheer panic. A transformer exploded in the distance, lighting the sky like a silent thunderstorm. And somewhere, far off, came the first deep boom of artillery. It echoed through the city like a grim clock ticking midnight. By the time I reached the train yard, night had fully fallen. I found a cold, dusty corner in an old maintenance shack, barricaded the door, and sat in the dark with only the faint glow of my crank radio for company. I listened to broken, fragmented broadcasts as the world changed. Brussels confirming casualty estimates in the tens of thousands. London reports targeted cyber attacks on transportation systems. U.S. bases in Germany moving to full alert. Unconfirmed sightings of armored units near the Czech border. I sat there for hours, sleepless, waiting. Because this wasn't just war. This was the end of the world we used to know. It's strange how silence can feel louder than any explosion. The moment after the second wave of missiles hit felt wrong. Not quiet, not peaceful, just wrong. I think the mind expects noise, sirens, people shouting, something. But there was only the sound of dust settling, the distant wail of a dog, and the harsh rasp of my own breathing. I wasn't in uniform anymore, not since I left the force 2 years ago. But some things don't leave you. The way your eyes sweep an area without thinking. The way your brain catalogs exits, choke points, vulnerabilities. That old training kicked in hard. I was crouched in the stairwell, 2 floors down from my apartment in a building in Kaunas, central Lithuania. The walls vibrated slightly from distant impacts, but the main structure held. The power was out. Cell signal dead. No data, no SMS. I kept checking anyway, like a tick. My neighbor, Mrs. Rasa, retired nurse, sharp as ever, was hyperventilating beside me. I took her hand and told her to keep quiet, just in case. She nodded, clutching a rosary. She hadn't said a word since the first explosion. It was around 5:40 a.m. when the first wave hit Vilnius. But Kaunas wasn't spared. Our airbase was a priority target. I knew it from the moment I saw the sky light up in that unnatural orange and felt the shock wave rattle every window in a 20-block radius. Whatever came next, it wasn't over. By 6:30 a.m., the sky was gray with smoke. Fighter jets, ours, had screamed overhead just once. After that, silence. Or maybe I just couldn't hear anymore. Around 7:10, we heard automatic gunfire. Close. Maybe 4 or 5 blocks away. Sporadic, like a checkpoint skirmish or house-to-house sweep. That's when I realized this wasn't just a missile barrage. They were here. I left the stairwell cautiously, staying low. I needed gear. My bug-out bag was under the bed, my old SIG P-226 locked in the safe. I moved fast, every instinct in me screaming that time was short. I passed broken glass, a dismembered door, a man slumped against the wall with a piece of metal shrapnel jutting from his thigh. He was alive, moaning softly. I stopped. Tourniquet, tight, pressure dressing, whispered instructions. He nodded, clutching the bandage. "You were Army?" he asked, voice hoarse. "Police," I said. "Used to be. You stay here. Quiet. If I get out, I'll send someone." He nodded. When I got into my apartment, the first thing I grabbed wasn't the bag or the gun. It was the radio. Battery-powered, shortwave. I'd modified it years ago when I was still playing with ham transmissions. Turned it on, scanning frequencies. Most channels were static. But around 7:30, I picked up something. A voice. Female. American accent. Calm, measured, pre-recorded. "This is a message from NATO Joint Response Command. Stay where you are. Reinforcements are being mobilized. Do not approach active conflict zones. Shelter in place until contacted. Repeat. This is not a test." That was it. No timestamp, no map, just the bare minimum. I took what I could carry. Pistol, food for 3 days, water, flashlight, knife, medkit. Radio in my coat pocket, volume low. I left my phone behind. No point dragging a dead brick. Outside, the world had shifted. It wasn't war yet. It was between. between knowing and acting, between denial and reality, that liminal space where panic breeds. I saw two Mi-17 helicopters flying low and fast toward the north. Civilian vehicles, old Ladas, beat-up trucks, were jammed at intersections. No organized exodus, just chaos. That's when I saw them. 4 men walking in formation. They weren't Lithuanian police or soldiers. No insignia, no flags, helmets, plate carriers, AK-12S Russian kit. They moved like they'd done this before. Room clearance, alley checks. They weren't kicking down doors randomly. They had a list, a map, a purpose. I ducked into a recessed shop entryway and held my breath as they passed. One of them was speaking Russian on a comms unit. I picked up just a phrase or two, enough to confirm my worst fears. Kaunas wasn't just being bombed, it was being occupied. I had to get out. I cut through alleyways and side streets, keeping close to walls, ducking behind dumpsters, ruined cars, anything with mass and shadow. My objective was simple: get out of the city, on foot if I had to. The roads were already gridlocked with civilians panicking, but the Russians hadn't locked it all down, yet. That meant I had a chance. The bag on my back was heavy, but manageable. Years on the force had taught me how to pack light and smart. I had water purification tablets, a weatherproof tarp, my pistol with 3 spare mags, and a laminated map. One of the old ones, from before everyone relied on GPS. I'd circled the city limits and marked a few exit routes, just in case. My bug-out plans weren't fantasy. Not anymore. I passed a burning car dealership, the flames casting eerie dancing shadows across the cracked asphalt. A woman knelt beside the road, cradling someone. Child or husband, I couldn't tell. I wanted to stop, but I couldn't. Not yet. By 9 a.m., gunfire was regular. Not sporadic anymore. Closer. I heard bursts from rifles, both NATO 5.56 and Russian 5.45. Someone was fighting back. But it wasn't organized. Civilians, maybe. Local police still holding a few stations. I knew the layout of our central precinct. It had been hardened against bomb threats, and I wouldn't be surprised if a few of the old guard were holed up inside. I thought of going there, linking up, maybe helping mount a resistance. But that was fantasy. They'd be overrun by nightfall. No reinforcements, no comms. NATO had its hands full. I'd seen this kind of strategy in military briefings. Russia had hit us first with cruise missiles, then cyber attacks, and finally boots on the ground before the West could fully mobilize. Cut off, divide, overwhelm. I knew the signs. It wasn't just Lithuania. This was happening in Poland, Estonia, Latvia, maybe Romania. All the frontline NATO members on the eastern flank. By 10:15, I reached the outskirts of a residential area known as Petrasiunai. Less density, more cover. Trees, old Soviet-style apartment blocks, and post-independence houses, abandoned or burning. I stopped to drink some water and check the radio. Another broadcast. This time garbled, interrupted by static. Klaipėda Naval Base, holding for now. Polish 17th Mechanized Brigade confirmed destroyed near Suwałki. Avoid main roads. Repeat. Avoid. Gone. That confirmed it. The Suwalki Gap, our only real land link to the rest of NATO, had been severed. Poland was cut off from the Baltics. We were on our own. I heard footsteps, fast, scraping. I ducked and raised the SIG, heart pounding. A teenager, maybe 16, came running down the side street, holding a hunting rifle. He skidded to a stop when he saw me, eyes wild. "You, military?" he gasped. "Ex-police," I said quickly, lowering the gun. "What's happening up the road?" They're taking people," he stammered. "Door to door. They shot my dad. Said he was hiding something. I ran." "How many of them?" "6, maybe more. They've got a drone overhead." Shit. I couldn't afford to get pinned here. "Name?" I asked. "Andreas." "All right, Andreas. You want to live? You stick close and you don't argue." He nodded, terrified, but trying to be brave. We moved as a unit. I watched the sky, listening for the faint buzz of UAV rotors. Twice I heard gunfire behind us, short, controlled bursts, execution style. I clenched my jaw. I couldn't help them, not yet. At a storage depot near the edge of town, I found a delivery van, keys still in the ignition, tank half full. Probably someone had loaded it with gear and fled. But it was a miracle to find anything not already looted or burning. "Andreas, get in." He hesitated. "Where are we going?" "West, toward the forest belt. I know a place, hunting lodge. Should be clear." He climbed in, gripping the rifle like a talisman. We didn't take the main roads. I used the old maintenance tracks that ran behind the industrial zones. Twice we passed Russian patrols, infantry, no armor. Yet. They weren't here to occupy. Not fully, not yet. They were here to cripple us, paralyze us, hold the terrain long enough for the real push. As we cleared the last ridge before the forest line, I caught a glimpse of the highway through binoculars. And what I saw chilled my blood. Columns of armor, BMPs, T-90s, trucks filled with troops, all bearing Russian military markings. The invasion had begun. The hunting lodge was real, tucked deep into the Zimitija forest, far from the urban chaos. I'd used it once, years ago, when training with a NATO liaison unit during a regional exercise. It had no power, no plumbing, but it had thick walls, a wood stove, a shallow well, and most importantly, no neighbors. We arrived late in the day. Andrios was quiet the whole ride, occasionally flinching when distant artillery rumbled. I had the radio on low, scanning both civilian and military frequencies. But most of the chatter was either encrypted or filled with static and fear. Confirmed strike on Rukla. NATO forces regrouping south of Kaunas. Airspace compromised. The lodge was still standing, untouched. I parked the van under a pine grove and covered it with a camo tarp I'd brought in my kit. No lights, no smoke. We couldn't risk it. Inside, I locked the door, secured the windows, and handed Andreas a blanket. He looked like a ghost. Sunken eyes, dirt smeared across his forehead, hands shaking slightly as he clutched the rifle. "I need you rested," I told him. "We don't know how long we'll stay here. Could be a day, could be a week." He nodded. I didn't sleep much that night. I couldn't. Every crack of a branch, every breeze against the siding made my body tense. My mind kept going over what I'd seen on the ridge. Dozens of Russian armored vehicles rolling toward the heart of Lithuania, unchallenged. I'd seen war in simulations, in drills, in briefings. But this was different. This was home. Day 3. The next morning, I woke to the smell of smoke, not from the lodge, but from outside. Distant, faint. Industrial smoke, not campfire, which meant the front was moving closer, or the resistance was making noise. I cooked some dry oats on the portable stove, rationed carefully. Andreas didn't say much, but he listened. I taught him how to reload mags, how to lay low and spot drones by their sound. Around noon, I picked up a weak broadcast. UN Security Council emergency meeting underway. NATO confirms mobilization of Article 5 forces. Polish border heavily fortified. Finally, Article 5, the Mutual Defense Clause. Too late for us, maybe, but it meant the world was awake now. Still, help wouldn't reach us for days, maybe weeks. If the Suwalki Gap remained closed, there would be no land reinforcements, only air, and the Russians had locked down much of the airspace with their S-400 batteries. I knew what we had to do next. "We can't stay here," I said. "Eventually they'll sweep the forests. They always do. You dig out the rats." "Where then?" Andreas asked. "There's a resistance cell that used to train near Panevizis, about 100 kilometers north. If they're still alive, they'll have contacts, gear, maybe even NATO advisors. You think they'll help us?" I shrugged. "If they're still breathing, they will." Day 4. We left just after 4 a.m. The morning was misty, visibility low. Good for us. I stashed the van further down the trail and started moving on foot, sticking to forest roads and hunting paths. By midday, we passed a group of refugees. About 10 people, families, elderly, walking west. One woman held a homemade sign. "We are Lithuanian civilians. Please don't shoot." Their eyes were hollow. We didn't stop. You couldn't afford to be kind in war. Not out here, not now. The Russians sometimes let civilians through, then use the convoys as cover for ambushes. I hated it, but I knew it. Near Kadainiai, we hit our first roadblock, literally. A flipped truck, burned out. Bodies nearby, both Lithuanian and Russian. It was fresh, maybe 6 hours old. I pulled Andreas into the ditch and scanned with binoculars. Someone was looting the corpses. 2 men, armed. Civilian clothes, but with military-grade rifles and radios. I crept closer, just enough to see the patches. Not Russian. Lithuanian. Militia. I lowered my weapon and emerged slowly, hands raised. One of them noticed me and froze, raising his rifle halfway. I called out in Lithuanian, "Not Russian, ex-police, need help." They relaxed, slightly. 10 minutes later, we were seated behind a burned-out sedan, sharing cold rations and talking fast. The leader was a man in his 40s, stocky, balding, and tired. He went by Tadas. "There's no more chain of command," he said. "What's left of the army pulled back to Klaipeda. The Americans are still in the region, but it's chaos. Best we've got are small bands like mine. Hit and run. Any news from Panavezis? I asked. He looked grim. Fighting there 3 days ago. Radio silence since. Andreas whispered. So we're too late? Not necessarily, I said. If they're hiding, they won't be broadcasting. It's what I'd do. Tadas handed me a hand-drawn map. There's a bunker here, old Soviet one. Resistance used it last year. If they're alive, that's where they'll be. I nodded. Appreciate it. Be careful, he added. We picked up chatter. Spetsnaz are sweeping the area, and they're not taking prisoners. That night, Andreas broke down. I can't do this, he said. I'm just a kid. I looked him in the eyes. So was I once. War doesn't care how old you are. It just asks one question. Will you fight, or will you run? He wiped his face and nodded. I'll fight. Day 5, 6:14 a.m. We set out again before dawn, following the makeshift map Tadas had marked for us. The bunker was roughly 30 kilometers north through heavily wooded terrain and small farming settlements, if any of those still existed after the strikes. I kept the compass close and my ears open. Movement had to be careful now. We weren't sneaking past conscripts anymore. Spetsnaz were in the region. These weren't the loud, stomping troops we'd seen pushing tanks down highways. These were the shadows. Fast, disciplined, silent. Kill teams sent in to root out resistance leaders, disrupt supply lines, and spread fear. And they were damn good at it. We stuck to tree lines and irrigation ditches, avoiding roads entirely. By midday, we passed the skeletal remains of a drone that had crashed in a field, still smoldering. Likely hit by small arms or maybe one of our old air defense teams. I picked up its casing and winced. Turkish Bayraktar, one of ours. Another bad sign. 11:48 a.m. The farmhouse. About 10 clicks out from the bunker site, we stumbled across a small farmhouse that hadn't been shelled to pieces. A rusting windmill turned lazily above, and there was a wood-burning smell in the air. Someone was still here. We approached from the rear, low and slow. I spotted a man outside chopping wood, late 60s, wiry and calm, in that rural, been-through-worse way. He saw us before we spoke and raised a hand in greeting, not alarm. Soldier? He asked in Lithuanian. Ex-police, I replied. Passing through. Just need water. He nodded and pointed to the pump. Use your own hands. No offense. None taken? We filled our canteens and accepted a strip of cured meat from the old man. He didn't ask questions, but I noticed his eyes dart off into the horizon, like he was always expecting something. They were here yesterday, he said suddenly. Who? Russian Special Forces. 4 of them. They didn't see me, but they left that behind. He pointed to a boot print in the mud. Deep, clean, wide step, not farmers. They're heading northeast, toward your bunker. I felt my stomach drop. They were going there too. 15:07 p.m., the edge of the forest. We reached the outskirts of the marked zone by mid-afternoon. A long gash in the earth led down into what looked like an old Cold War-era entrance. Steel blast doors, half rusted, with overgrowth crawling around it. The entire thing was camouflaged from the sky. I doubted even satellites would catch it unless you knew what to look for. But it had been used recently. Boot prints, spent casings, a discarded ration pack, French. NATO had been here. "Do we knock?" Andreas asked. "Hell no." I circled the perimeter first, looking for sensors, wires, traps. Didn't find any obvious ones, but I did find a side tunnel, smaller, reinforced with concrete and mostly buried under moss and branches. If they're smart, they use the side door, not the obvious one. We slipped inside. 15:48 p.m. underground. The air was damp and stale, thick with that mildew and metal stink you get in old bunkers. The flashlight beam danced over maps, broken furniture, and old propaganda posters in Cyrillic. Deeper inside, we found signs of life, recent ones. A kettle, a half-burnt log, a NATO med pack, and then voices. I froze and signaled Andreas to stay low. I stepped forward, weapon at the ready, and called out in English. "Friendly, ex-police, looking for the Panavizi cell." Silence. Then, step forward, hands visible. 3 men emerged from the shadows, dirty, armed, alert. One wore a patched-up British multicam uniform. Another had an American M4. The third looked Lithuanian, maybe late 20s. No insignias, no names. "Who are you?" the Brit asked. "I was Kaunas City Police. Saw the Russians roll in on day 1. We've been moving north since then. We're not here to compromise you." The Lithuanian stepped forward. "Code word?" I didn't have one. He frowned, raised his rifle, and then the Brit stopped him. "Wait, I know his face." He squinted. "Weren't you in the 2022 NATO counter-terror drill in Rukla? You trained with us." I blinked. "Yeah, I was attached for 2 weeks. You were the liaison from 3rd Royal Anglians. Christ, small world." They let us in. 16:11 p.m. inside the cell. The resistance was barely a dozen people. NATO advisors, local fighters, medics. They'd taken heavy losses in the last 4 days. Half their group was gone, either killed or scattered. But they still had supplies, radios, coordination, a generator that ran a few hours each night, and a working link to higher command, if the Russians didn't triangulate it. "You're the first to reach us from the south," their de facto leader, a U.S. staff sergeant named Monroe, told me. "Most haven't made it." "What's your mission now?" I asked. "Evacuate what we can. We've got civilians in nearby farms. We're trying to exfil across the Latvian border before they surround us." Andreas looked nervous. "Are we going with them?" I nodded slowly. "We'll help." "Can you shoot?" Monroe asked him. He hesitated. "I can try." "That's good enough." 18:30 p.m., the plan. We were going out again that night, a supply run and recon to confirm that the path north was still open. But Spetsnaz were near. We could hear them now, on the radio, speaking encrypted Russian. Their presence was like a shadow stretching across the land. I cleaned my rifle, checked my mags, and looked across the room at Andreas. He wasn't a kid anymore, not by the week's end. I wasn't sure either of us would survive the next 24 hours. Day 6, 21:03 p.m. The op was simple on paper. Get in, grab the last cache of food and medical supplies from a safe house 3 kilometers west, then sweep north to check a potential evac path toward the Latvian border. We'd move in 2 teams, ours to collect, theirs to secure and mark a trail. We went at night, under cloud cover. No drones, no air support, no second chances. Andreas stuck close to me, gripping his borrowed rifle like it was a lifeline. The kid had changed, less shaking, more eyes up, still scared. He'd be stupid not to be. But he moved with purpose now, like he knew his survival depended on it. Our boots made no sound across the forest floor, and the silence was absolute. Even the birds had stopped. 21:48 p.m. The ambush. It happened as we crossed a narrow logging path, just 400 meters from the house. 3 flashes. I hit the dirt. Heard the cracks after the muzzle flashes. Silencers. Night vision scopes. Spetsnaz. Monroe's voice came through the radio. Contact, left flank. Take cover. Tracer rounds zipped overhead as we dove behind logs and stumps. One of the British guys took a round through the neck before he could fire back. He went down gargling blood. Another soldier, Thomas, dragged him back while firing blind into the trees. I saw 2 shapes dart across the clearing, fluid, fast, impossible to pin down. I waited. Controlled breathing, then popped up and fired 3 rounds at a silhouette crossing between trees. Hit something. He dropped like a sack of bricks. Andreas was next to me, face pale, whispering, I can't see them. You will, I said. Stay low. Aim where the flashes are. He nodded, knuckles white. 22:14 p.m. aftermath. The firefight lasted less than 6 minutes. 4 Spetsnaz operatives, likely part of a recon extermination team. We killed 3. 1 disappeared. Maybe wounded, maybe watching us still. We reached the safe house, which had already been raided. Food mostly gone, some meds left. Enough to be worth the trip, barely. The dead soldier's dog tags went into Monroe's vest. It wasn't the first man he'd lost. It wouldn't be the last. We can't do this much longer, he told me quietly as we stood over the body. They're closing in. Every day they push deeper. If we don't break out now, we're buried here. What's your plan? We move tomorrow night, everything we've got, north toward Juniskis. From there, the Latvian line. And if they're waiting? Then we go down fighting. Day 7, 17:30 p.m. The bunker was a hive of motion. People packing, inventorying ammo, bandaging wounds. Radios chattered with fragmented messages from other cells, mostly bad news. A lot of the resistance in central Lithuania was either dead or had gone completely dark. NATO command wasn't responding anymore, either overrun or gone black. Andreas found me sitting near the old map table, cleaning my rifle one last time. Do you think we'll make it? He asked. Honestly, no idea. He looked away. But we're going to try, and that's all that matters. He gave a tight nod and passed me a small tin of chocolate from the farmhouse we'd stopped at. in case we don't. Might as well enjoy something. 20:52 p.m. The breakout. We moved in formation through the woods under a moonless sky. 30 people, half of them barely trained. 4 kilometers through open terrain, across a field, and into the next patch of forest. Then north. If we could make it there was an old industrial rail tunnel, a possible rat line the resistance used years ago. It might be our only way out. No lights, no talking. Every crunch of a twig sounded like a gunshot. We were halfway through the second field when the sky lit up. A flare. Red. We froze. Then came the mortars. 21:01 p.m. hell. The first round hit 30 meters behind us. The next hit the front line. Screams, chaos, dirt flying. We scattered, zigzagging toward the tree line. I grabbed Andrios and shoved him forward. Go! Don't stop! Monroe was shouting orders. Rally on the tree line. Find cover. Keep moving. One woman, a medic, was hit in the leg and dragged by 2 others. Another man fell and didn't get up. Machine gun fire from the ridge began cutting into us. They were hurting us, pushing us away from the tunnel path toward the open fields. Trap. I knew it. Monroe knew it. Keep left, I yelled. There's a stream bed. We dove for the water, barely a trickle in summer, but the embankment gave us just enough cover. Andreas and I followed it for 200 meters before ducking into a collapsed drainage pipe. We waited, listening, breathing. Some of the others made it. Some didn't. 22:37 p.m. extraction. When we finally reached the tunnel, only 14 of the 30 were left. We found the hatch hidden under the overgrowth and pried it open. Inside, it was black, wet, cramped, but safe. We followed the rails north, half blind, stomachs empty, and just before dawn, we reached the other end. Latvia, NATO-controlled territory. We collapsed outside, just past the tree line. A Lithuanian army patrol picked us up 2 hours later. 1 week later, I'm in a refugee camp now, Poland. Rebuilt fences, ration lines, rumors. But at least no mortars. Andreas is alive. He got a shallow wound on day 6, but pulled through. I heard Monroe didn't make it. Last seen covering the rear. They say the front has shifted again, that Russia's stalling, that NATO's counterattacks are finally landing. But that's politics, propaganda. All I know is what I saw. Cities burning, drones screaming, friends dying, and I survived. The first week of World War III.